most of entrepreneurs are visionaries, right? They see a vision, have to fulfill that vision. And you have to get personnel in place to help you get to each step of your vision. But as a visionary, sometimes it's a lonely road because you see certain things that you have to do to get to your vision. And you recognize there's certain personnel and skill sets that you need on each step of the way. That goes back to that stair step approach that we're talking about. So you have to look at it two ways. And the one way I really talk to our team a lot about is that there's people that help you climb the mountain and there's people that help you stay there. Those are two different skill sets that you have to have. And just think of that stair step as a ledge. Once you get over that ledge, that flat ground, there are people that may have to help till that ground and make sure it's sustainable. And you have to find a next group to help you grow it. If you look at Amazon, Microsoft, and all these different things that grow, there's certain people that came with them that stay with them, but there's also a certain set of skill set that needs to stay on that first phase. But if you can section out kind of where your approach is, and if you can stair step it, it's easier to identify, I need you on this level. I have to go to the next level. And these are skill sets I need for that too. And it's not always easy because most people can't see that.
What does it take to lead when the vision is big, the pace is fast, and the team is looking to you for clarity? Today on Heliona Insight, I'm joined by Chris Jones, a founder and operator who's learned to scale by doing the hardest parts of leadership well, getting clear on the vision, communicating what matters, and building the capacity around him to make it real. We talk about the lonely side of leadership, the stair-step approach to growth, hiring for the phase you were in, not the phase you wish you were in, and why you can't build systems only for your highest performers. Chris gets honest about burnout, boundaries, and leading with family in the picture, how to move fast without breaking the people you are asking to carry the load. If you've ever been the one holding it all together, this conversation will feel uncomfortably familiar and incredibly useful. So let's get into it. Hello. I apologize for interrupting your listening experience, but this is worth it. Stay with me. On October 15, we are bringing Workplace Unfiltered, a Heliona experience that is the Heliona Life podcast. The top 5 guests, the most listened guests, will be in a roundtable discussion on October 15 at the Abbott in downtown Kansas City. That's the Abbott, ABBOTT. Which is the venue here in Kansas City for the listeners outside of KC. Shout out to Chicago, Iowa, Illinois. Thank you guys for always tuning in. But I want you to picture this. One night with leaders from across the country, HR professionals, mental health providers, and you, the listener, all in the same room for unfiltered conversation about performance and mental health. It's live, it's going to be honest, and yes, you can be part of it. So make sure to RSVP today at heliona.io. That's HELIONA.io. Or you can visit the show notes right now and make sure to RSVP on the event page. We only have a block for 50 people, exclusive to my listeners and LinkedIn followers. We'd love for you guys to show up October 15, and I would love to meet everyone. There'll be food available, drinks, coffee, amazing time. Doors open at 4:30 p.m. Central Time. So again, visit heliona.io to learn more or visit the show notes. And cheers. All right, Chris, thank you so much for being on the Heliona Insight podcast. I've actually had you on my forum healthcare podcast, but I feel like your story needs more justice, on the professional side to also dive into it. So one of the things that I want to start with, especially our conversation forum, you just the resilient aspect of who you are and how you go about building your business. And I want to go into that, especially on the resilient side of it. I'm familiar with your story, but I feel like a lot of people are not. But like on a professional level, how does it feel as a founder? You've accomplished so many things in your career, but yet you have such a phenomenal story. And I know you've shared with me how you go about balancing those two areas.
Right.
Like, how do you go about as a founder running a very successful healthcare company, and then working with all these incredible human beings that are they all know what they're doing, and you were able to bring all of them together. But then how do you balance that aspect and also your own personal story?
Yeah, I think it's difficult for sure, because everybody brings their own expertise, their niche. One thing I talk about a lot is about, understanding where your gaps are, things that you may not be good at.
Right.
So most of the people on my team know I'm very vocal about where my gaps are. It doesn't mean that I can't articulate through them and make my way through those, but it's hard to be proficient at everything, right? So you focus on what you're good at. And a lot of times when I'm looking for resource or support or bringing in team members, they're there to fill in the gaps that I may have, right? To help things move more proficiently forward. So filling the gaps is what I focus on first, right? Find somebody that can fill in that gap, because you have somebody that does the same thing as good as you are.
Right.
You're kind of contradicting yourself there, right? So the first part is to make sure you find the right sources for the right resources for the right gaps. And that starts a conversation. Then there's a characteristic meet into where your brand or where your mindset is going. Because even though I have the full force of my why behind me, it may not be good for the business side of it too, that your why may be too strong to where offset the opportunity to make money. So you got to have them not contradicting views, but opposite just thought process on how to approach in the same direction, because it just makes you a more powerful team. But gaps are so important. Understand your gaps and where they are, and see you can get to fill those gaps for you, because you can't fill your own gaps at times. It just takes too long.
Right. So like when it comes to identifying those gaps, like how can you define that process of doing that, especially as a CEO of a healthcare company that has a very specific, goal as far as like when it comes to healthcare? You guys are, working in the record space. You build a phenomenal solution that makes it easier for anyone to go and have their entire lineage record in one application to make sure that when you find yourself in like in a healthcare emergency, you can easily access that.
Yeah.
And which ties to your own personal story. Yeah. But when it comes to those gaps, like how do you go about explaining that as a founder and making sure that your own personal story doesn't take away from that? Because you have a very phenomenal, strong personal story.
Yeah, so I think the foundation is important. So for each company, they have to understand what their foundation is. So for us, our foundation is make sure you can pull in a unified health record into one portal or one connectivity. And that was our foundational process, our point that we focus on first, right?
Right.
And that drives technology, has to drive that piece. And technology will limit sometimes what you want to do in business and what business may be able to accept, So, and what companies are your clients may be able to tie into. The technology could limit that. So what I focus on is how good can we make the technology and how good can we make the foundation of the technology to start the conversation. So I've talked a lot about to potential clients and partners about how that we want to do one thing well, right? We want to make sure that we can unify the health record and know that when that health record is there, it's the source of truth. Right. Now, what happens on top of that, AI and all these great, data plays that comes with that, it's all phenomenal. It's phenomenal to do those things. But the first thing we want to do, the first thing well, is make sure we can aggregate that data as a source of truth on behalf of the patient. And that takes a mission within itself, right? There's certain things that happen within those spaces. I understand that we want to make sure that when you connect with our system, you pull your information as that information came from where it's supposed to come from. Right. And that it is the accurate information on at least the documentation of what your health is. So that's what we started on. Everybody rallied behind that information, but behind that goal. And then when everybody rallied behind that goal, when all those shiny objects, AI and all those things came in forefront, we know we're trying to get there, but we wanted to make sure we do that foundational thing right and build those stair steps. So I come from a technology background. They have the waterfall method, and that's just kind of step by step that you take. And everybody's used to this agile method when you just kind of do a bunch of things and make them come together. So we look at it as an agile method of trying to get everybody together to work towards one common goal that really is a waterfall stair step to the next goal that we're trying to go to. So we use the agile method to build that waterfall growth. So we look at it from a standpoint is that there's certain stair steps that you have to get there, and each stair step require a group of people coming together, filling in gaps to understand how to get that stair step. And each one of those stair steps may require a different subset of people or partners to get there. And when you look at it that way, everybody comes together to get to one stair step. You may not be able to use the same, I talk about the journey a lot, but you may not be able to use the same people or personnel that got you the first half of that journey. You may have to, find a whole nother set of partners as you get on the next stair step of this goal. So the next goal, so to speak. So I look at it as a team coming together agilely to get to one portion of this and make sure you have a foundational goal and make sure you do that right. And then let the next stair steps kind of follow each other.
Yeah. And you know, like a team of this podcast, because you know I've talked to a lot of leaders here, and they also share that similar, you know, experience of having to find new team members after you go to a certain stage and you achieve something, and now you have to go to the next phase. And sometimes even founders find themselves in this position. I had a guest who even shared how he's constantly making sure that he's upskilling, continuous learning.
Yep.
He's making sure that he knows his market just so that he can stay sharp. But then the other side of that is like, how do you navigate that, having to move to the next step, the people that brought you there, and then that grief of having to, you know, part ways because they no longer have the capabilities to take the company to where it needs to go. Like how on your own personal journey, not even personal, but your own journey as a CEO of a healthcare company, which is already complex. But how do you go about always making sure either your team is always upskilling, or if you get to a point where they don't have the capabilities, as hard as that sound. How do you go about navigating that grief?
It's really hard, right? And so that's the leadership, and so most of entrepreneurs are visionaries, right? They see a vision, have to fulfill that vision, and you have to get personnel in place to help you get to each step of your vision. But as a visionary, sometimes it's a lonely road because you see certain things that you have to do to get to your vision, and you recognize there's certain personnel and skill sets that you need on each step of the way. That goes back to that stair step approach that we're talking about. So you bring a lot of group of people together, get you to that first step, that first ledge, and it's hard at that time because you recognize the people that did the hard work to get you there may not be valuable for the next step, right? But at the same time, there may be skills in place to help you solidify and maintain that foundation piece. So you have to look at it two ways. And one way I really talk to our team a lot about is that there's people that help you climb the mountain and there's people that help you stay there. Those are two different skill sets that you have to have. And just think of that stair step as a ledge. Once you get over that ledge, that flat ground, there are people that may have to help till that ground and make sure it's sustainable. And you have to find a next group to help you grow it. If you look at Amazon, Microsoft, and all these different things that grow, there's certain people that came with them that stayed with them, but there's also a certain set of skill set that needs to stay on that first phase. If you're just talking about documentation in Microsoft, that's great. You can, there's a certain set of people that supports that. But then when you talk about integrating that into other platforms and stuff, Microsoft have to do it a little bit different now. They have to find a skill set that's thinking about integration. So it's a different set of skill sets that need. But if you can section out kind of where your approach is, and if you can stair step it, it's easier to identify, I need you on this level. I have to go to the next level. And these are skill sets I need for that too. That's one that I did it. I just to find out what portion of the stair step we're trying to get to and where I need you at, where your skill sets are best at. And it's not always easy because most people can't see that. And the hardest thing to do is that you get people that came in that mentored you to get there, right? And you realize you outgrown the mentor. Those are the hardest things to take on.
That's hard.
It is. But if you want to be successful and grow, you have to realize that, okay, this is a little bit bigger than you. I'll share this and I'll be done with this. But when I first started, I remember going in rooms and sitting in rooms and like, goodness, man, they were eating me alive about what my vision was, what I was doing. How are you the one to be able to do it? And so on and so forth. But it took me about 2 or 3 years to realize when I walked in this room, instead of being intimidated being in those rooms, I could look across the table. And as successful as these people were across the table, I realized that the product was bigger than the room, right? When you understand that product can be bigger than a room, you can walk out there like they just don't understand, no matter how much success they have. If everybody gets intimidated by what somebody's already done before, where does innovation start, right? It doesn't start in a room where everybody already understands it. Innovation starts when it's outside of what the normal understanding of what technology should do. And once you grasp that point, and you really kind of look at where the market is, you're doing your work and understanding what the market is saying, what is repeating back to you. You're out there tilling the ground, you're hammering nails, and you're on the ground level. So you know what the market and the technology is telling you how it integrates. So you sit in some of these rooms, people are accustomed to what they know, what the last 20 years of technology has taught them, last 15 years of them in executive position has taught them. It doesn't mean they understand where the next innovation could go. And that's why you see a lot of these companies now looking for smaller companies to come and integrate with, because they understand what's on the ground level. It's even more important now that smaller companies come in and show the big picture to larger companies, because they're the ones that's really on the ground making things happen. And together they make good products, right? And you see it all around the globe and all around technology. There's just larger companies that have these smaller startups that's coming in space to help enhance what their product already is.
Wow. You've given me so much to like go off of, and I'm gonna start here just to make sure that I don't just share everything that's flying in my head. That's why I wear a bandana and a fedora to make sure that I can have.
Well, I might need that because everything comes out. No,
I hear you.
Whatever's in my head, it just comes out.
No, I hear you. I always feel that need to just like drop everything at once. But over the years of talking to so many people, I've learned to like dissect the questions as we go. But the first question that came up is like, your company is becoming a global company. You guys are working in Africa now like Portugal. You're going to all these different places, and you've talked about just growth, outgrowing people that you're with. But like, there's an other side to that. Like, how do you make sure that you're hiring someone at such a fast growing scale? Like, how do you make sure that you are not bringing someone who may even stifle that growth? Because I had a guest here who said he doesn't hire people that on LinkedIn they put like, I work for this company, this company, this company, this company. Like Google, all the Fortune companies. He noticed that not all of them, but some of them come in and they will try to hold the actual growth because they're so experienced and they see all the bad things that could happen, so they stop the founders from growth. Like, how do you go about that? And also maintaining, I guess, like a respectable and a good culture while you were trying to hire or like, find the right people for the right positions.
Yeah, I'm going through that even now, right? That doesn't stop, right? So there's people that help you climb the mountain to a certain point, right? That's been a part of that, but it's your job as a founder or the leader that to identify if it's not going a direction that you want to take it.
Right.
So you're the visionary. So those conversations are always hard, always tough, and they're expected, right? You know that as a leader, that's part of your role, right? If you have kids, it's no different, right? You have the kids, they have their own vision of what they want to do, and you let them go in their own direction because it's their life, whatever.
Right.
But you got to understand if it's your company, you're driving it, you have the vision, then you have to drive it and make sure it's directing the way you want it to go.
Right.
You're not always going to pick right. You're not going to do that, right? You get as most out of the person that you can to drive towards your vision. But when it becomes cancerous to where it affects everybody else's vision, you got to get rid of that fast.
Yeah.
That's a lesson that I learned just recently, right? So when things happen and you feel like your gut's going to tell you, right? That intuition that you have, right, where things are going. And I'm more of the most inclusive person you'll probably ever meet, right? So I'm helping you, trying to help. I'm trying to help you help me, right? Right. And that's not the way it should be, right? And that's something I had to learn, right? But over time, what I've started to understand too is that fire fast, get rid of fast, because that cancer, that festation of negativity, right, towards the vision can slow everything down. And before you know it, you're like, I could have cut this off a long time ago and been further down the road. So you can do your best to really identify the best fit for your company, right? What I will tell you, one thing I've learned that not to have is when a person comes to you and they're talking about what they've done and how they connect to it, and they never see anything that they've done wrong, right? And what they adjusted to, right? That's a number one issue. I think get rid of those fast. Don't at all, because again, it's about the gaps. It goes back to what I was saying before. They have to identify their gaps, because they don't, they'll be working towards something that they're not really good at. You're trusting them to do certain things that they can't do. If they're open and honest on where their strengths are, then it helps you to understand to put them in a place of success, right? To help you grow too. So honesty is really important. About who you are and what you're doing. So if somebody give you a long list of things that they've done, they work for these big companies, that tells me that you probably haven't had to grind as hard because you've had resources you can tap into. When you're starting something, you need somebody that can think on their feet and find stuff when they have to find the resources to be successful. That's a different person, right? Than somebody give you a budget, two or people working under you and stuff of that nature. But if somebody got to find the resources to support it, that's a different type of person you're looking for.
Right. No, yeah. I actually fell into that one time as a founder, because I hired a guy who was a former, CMO. I worked as a CMO, but it was, I was like a fractional CMO. I bounced from one company to another, but he worked at a CMO at a very big company. And when I hired him, he came in and he was like, wait, so where's my team? I was like, wait, what? Like, this is a startup. We don't have a team. You figure it out.
Them days is gone. You're trying to get there, right? So, and there may be, and I will you may need them down the road, but now,
exactly.
I need somebody that has a book bag that brings a book bag of tools with them, right? That I can tap into.
Like a Swiss knife.
Yes. You have to have that now. Even in the larger companies now, is that you see is that they're reducing staff sizes for a reason, because I realize you need people efficient in tools and how to use them, and can be called on to do certain things. Because even technology and marketing are cross-referencing themselves now. You have to be good at marketing. You got to understand technology.
Yep.
It just crosses the same board. And even as a CEO now, running a business, you can't just understand the day to day and be able to communicate the day to day. I got to sit on here and communicate with you and let you know, all right, here's where we're going to be the seller of the business. Well, right. So marketing can lead certain ways, but see, even in leading the company, you can't just lead the team. You have to lead the vision and branding of the company as well.
Absolutely. I mean, it's, especially right now, that there's so much, speed required in like ideas or vision. I feel like technology is moving so fast. Sometimes by the time you realize your vision is already absolute. Yeah. There's so many people that have already done it because you're like, oh my God, how do I keep up?
Keep up.
Which also brings another, question, because I don't have a lot of founders on this podcast. Usually I talk to a lot of execs, like C-suites, people that are like, they have hundreds of thousands of employees. They're very high up there. I've talked to someone who owns companies across the country. And usually when it comes to burnout, I feel like they don't normally have a solid answer. And I know you are like on that fast growing space where you're growing very fast. You're having to hire fast. You're fire fast. And I know yourself, you're traveling a lot. How do you see burnout play out in this time of your career? Now that you have kids, I know you have a family. The family is growing as well, and then your company is growing at the same time. How does burnout play out for you?
It not only burnout's not only a part of this process, but it's also important. It's an important part of just learning and growing. Burnout for me kind of is the toughest part of this because when you're going through the burnout phase of things, you're always thinking about, am I doing too much? What can I cut back on? Can I get more resources? Is this for me? You get all those questions asked, but that's when you tap into that why. You kind of look at it and say, hey, is this one of the things to where I'm really not being truthful with myself on what I can accomplish, or is it just a phase to get to that next step? So it's never really easy, right, to make the right decisions on when it's time to stop, when it's time to rest. But I always put family first. If I can, I just saw this and I hope I don't get this mixed up. I want to say it was one actor said, he said, I know a true entrepreneur is when they wake up at night when they're asleep, they're looking at the roof and they turn over and look at their wife and say, hey, we may not be able to do things we want to do because we have to pay employees, right? Decisions like that, right? Those are burnout things, but it's things necessary for it to grow.
Right.
But the important part of entrepreneurs, what do you have to do to keep it growing? What is true burnout to where you can slice off this and really focus as less as possible? But burnout is one of those things to where it's in the eye of the beholder, right? How much can you take to get there?
Right.
And you're always asking yourself, is this plausible? You're gonna, as a founder, you're gonna always ask yourself, am I doing too much?
Right.
No, so it's the gut check thing. I don't have a good answer for that. All I can tell you is that there's many times I looked at the ceiling and I looked at my wife like, man, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing? But that's the part of it too.
I can relate to that. Thank you for that, like detailed answer as a founder. Because normally, again, like I said, I don't talk to a lot of founders here. Usually they're well-established CEOs. Sometimes, I hear the answer, but as a founder, especially founders that listen to this podcast, I feel like I haven't answered that question for them because the reality is what you just said. Yeah. Like, we just founded something. This is something that we've created, and we're working day and night and making sure that the vision comes to life. And I want to ask you this question: like, what do you think differentiates a founder and then a CEO? Because you are a founder and a CEO, but you are the founder at the end of the day.
Yeah, interesting comment. It's funny you asked me that because I spend most of my time trying to blend them together. Right. I spend most of my time to be the leader of it, right? But then found the company. So to me, a founder has a strong why or a strong input behind what he does, whatever. And a lot of times it drives him through the chaotic part of things, right? You can depend on that founder not to hand off the pressure, but to walk everybody through the pressure. From a CEO standpoint, I think usually it's like you're running somebody else's vision, that you're really good at organization structure. So when pressure comes, you're looking at a way to save the company. And I talk about this a lot with my team. It's a difference between the mindset of a saving a company, right? The structure makes sure it's in the best position than building it.
Right.
A founder is always building it to a point to where it gets to the point to where some of the people are following you blindly to the space because they're seeing where you're headed. They don't see necessarily where you're headed, but they see the passion that you're driving there. A CEO breaks down here's the beginning, here's the end, right? And here's how we're going to get there. Everybody understands their role. They understand they even understand their cutoff rate. If you run a project from a CEO, they might say, this is a 6-month project we'll need you on. Once this is done, we won't need you anymore.
Right.
From a founder standpoint, we're like, if we get to this point, I'm going to need you to do X, Y, and Z. And do you have your Swiss Army knife book bag of tools that we can leverage with it, right? Not only is a founder to me is more visionary driving, they have a whole different set of tools or relationships behind them that's helping them drive forward. Right. A CEO comes with a lot of, to me, would have a lot of structure behind it. As a founder, I'm fighting to get that, right? You're always fighting to get that CEO mentality. But I think without a founder mentality, sometimes you're limited in a way, right? To only do what you're told and what structure is. Right. But a vision would take it another direction. And a good example to me, I always talk about Steve Jobs and when they pushed him away from the company, right? Steve Jobs they were struggling with Steve Jobs because he didn't operate as a CEO. He operated as what? A founder. When he presented and told the story of where things was headed, he was dragging people in places that they were uncomfortable, right? Yeah. And that's where the founder lives, is building, right? Everybody else, I think, from a CEO mentality, if that's the only mentality you have, you're only saving what already exists. A founder is building something that doesn't.
Yeah. Wow, that's deep. That's a very psychological response to how different the two positions are, but why it's also important to, as a founder, to blend and have balance between those two. Because to your point, Steve Jobs did lose his company at some point, even though they realized they needed him. But I'm sure he went through extreme training.
It's you know what? To me, I'll take it a step further. It's the structure of it, right? Everybody's fighting for structure because that's what they understand. Right. A founder's a visionary. That structure doesn't exist because they're innovating, right? When you're innovating something, you can't tap into something that exists, right? So it becomes a structure. And you need it, even as a founder. It has to reel us in, right? But once we're reeled in and we find our pocket as founders, whatever, that's when we become very dangerous, whatever, because we know the walls that we live inside. Yeah. We know when we can step out and step into it. So I think founders can be really effective and really effective in any company. Yeah. You need that CEO, but you also need that founder side by side. Right. And I think it was Steve Jobs' sidekick. I can't think. I think he still runs it now.
Wozniak.
Wozniak. Yeah.
Wozniak. Yeah.
So if you think about Wozniak, where he said he wasn't the face of it, but he structured everything around there. But Steve Jobs was driving it. You need both of those, like that oil and water, to make it grow. Right. But those are the difference between a founder and CEO to me, is that it's the structure side of whatever. Yeah, sometimes us founders, we live outside the boundaries of structure. Sometimes.
Yeah, we have a little bit of delusion and. I call it positive delusion. If you're aware of that delusion, because it's like walking up to people that have spent years even right now. I'm trying to, I'm like slowly bringing in someone who has a doctorate in psychology. She's like, it's like talking to her. I feel like I have to have the dictionary just to understand what she's saying. But then as a founder, I can see all the ways that I can help her and vice versa, she can help me. That's one of the reasons why I approach her. It's like, I know I lack this and I need you to come and manage the internal culture and the relationship with the client so that I can live in the delusion and keep taking us as far as I can.
100% true.
And I know she has that expertise. I see her as a possible CEO in the future. Yeah. Because I don't need to be sitting in that position. It's like, it limits me.
Yeah, I remember going through a lot of the, I don't know if I'm ashamed or positive to say this. I've been through a lot of accelerators over the years, right? With multiple businesses. I think I've been in 8 or 9 of them and probably been in the group of upwards of 80 companies I've been in these groups with. I got to see them more intimately and how these companies grow. Right. One thing I've done, what I've started to do since I've kind of evolved from accelerator side of it, is one thing I recognize is that there's buzzwords and buzz terms that get coached through them all, right? And when I say this, different spaces of accelerators, I've been in a bunch of them, right? But there's buzzwords and cultures and accelerators that exist across the continuum of it, right? These accelerators that makes them all kind of succinct, similar in ways. But what I've learned is that I got away from the buzzwords and the revenue and all this stuff. All that stuff is necessary, right? But I started to think outside that. And the important part about everything that you learned about business stuff, you have to know when to pull them in when they're needed. They're not the answer. They only should be pulled in as needed, right? Some terminology and stuff. They put stuff in the deck. It has to be X, Y, and Z, whatever. The most success I had when I sat in a room and had a conversation, said, I'm not leaving out of here till you understand what I'm talking about, right? And in 5 or 6 minutes sitting across the table, I feel that imposter syndrome, whatever. you can get up and walk away. You start to narrow around all the BS, right?
Yeah.
And get right to the core text of what you're trying to come across. And what I've just learned just from accelerated standpoints and being in these groups with a lot of entrepreneurs is that we find ourselves all the time trying to fit inside this box that we've been taught to do. You got to have a revenue model reference. I remember when I first started the Match Right, and we were talking about this 7 years ago. And I'm in a world of Cerner, it's Oracle now. But I remember sitting and pitching, and they said, "Chris, you're bull in the ocean, right? What you're building is there's too much like this out. There's no comparable." And I was sitting there thinking, like, not only am I not bull in the ocean, I could be a support to the very thing you thought was like mine, right?
Right.
So all that's coming in the forefront 6-7 years later. But at that time, if I had to just let that resonate in my mind and walk away, that they are giving me really good insights on where this is headed, and I should walk away from it, I wouldn't even be sitting in front of you today or whatever.
True.
But founders have to move outside of what the notebook says and the paper says, and go into what they believe and drive forward. Even when things doesn't always seem plausible. But if you've done your own product market fit and you think it's plausible, then you should go for it.
Right. I know. Yeah. I mean, I feel like we have like similar beliefs in like being a founder, running a company.
Yeah.
And like, I do want to go into the process a little bit, because I know being a founder is comes with a lot of pressure, and sometimes the pressure can trickle down to the people very easily if you're not aware. And in this podcast, we like talk about like retention a lot, like retaining people, especially from like an executive, like standpoint.
Yeah.
As a founder, how do you see that play out? You trying to navigate the vision, manage your executive team, and then also retaining the people within the whole ecosystem. Like, what are some mistakes that you may see as a founder? And when it comes to retention, retaining your people, and then also how do you navigate that as well? Yeah,
egos, I think first. it is right. Mine and everybody else is that I don't try to portray an ego at all, right? And I probably should show more, at least pressure on my vision than I do, right? But I'm always inclusive in conversations, inclusive in ideas all the time. And what I've learned is that the egos that sit on the other side gets broader, right? Yeah. And balancing those become really important, because the ego is the first thing that to the demise of a relationship to me. Yeah. Because what it comes in is that if you're the visionary, you're building it, and you put this thing in place, your company, your direction, unfortunately, somebody behind the scenes that's working with you, around you, have to follow that lead, right? But egos make it hard to do that, right? Yeah. Especially, and it's not egos as a bad thing. They may have a product they want to get. They maybe have something they want to do in the future. But once taming the egos are the most important thing, at least identifying them. Right. So when you see those things creeping up in some of the conversation, whatever, you got them to where it's like, you're falling behind my vision. This is the way I say, I need your input, but I'm trying to get us to a certain position. Can you see the direction that I'm headed? Right. And I think it's important for that founders not necessarily have to put their ego over somebody else's ego, but you got to portray that vision. And that vision may come off as you have an ego, but it really you just trying to drive them towards the vision, right? Right. And my wife said something just this week. She was like, "Chris, if you build it, you got it connected globally and all these things. When you bring people in, they have to see the direction that you're taking it. Because if we had the same vision, they would have already done it, right? Right. So you have people see that. Yeah. You have to have people to be able to walk with you, right? And not behind you, but beside you, right? Yeah. So, and that's the things that I've learned over time, right? Because I'm very inclusive as a person. I'm very looking forward to people give me any input, any thought process, whatever. But what I also learned too is that as I get this input, sometimes I'm like, well, I hear what you're saying, but this is the direction we have to go. Right. And sometimes I give that too much credence, right? Yeah. It should be cut off sooner. So there's things I have to learn at the same spot to where that would give that person that feels like I'm not giving them maybe they're just do whatever, they have another vision, that they may want to cut off and go a different direction, which is fair, right? Right. But it's on both sides. So I had to learn over time to be more direct in what we're doing and where we're headed and what the vision is, right? If the input doesn't fit the vision, it just don't fit the vision. It doesn't mean that it's not good for something that you want to do. True. Take your lessons and learn and be able to build it. And I would support that 100%, because who knows, down the line, it may help us even grow efficiently too.
No, yeah, I have a similar experience with that where, about 4 years ago, I had a team of like 60, I think 64, 65. Yeah. And like I had a CEO that I brought in, and then I also brought in a communications expert. They're all like very qualified individuals.
Yeah.
They come to the office with a suit on, and I show up with shorts and fedora and chains and 6 rings. So they were like the typical people that are ready to scale the company. Which I that was the reason why I brought them in. But what I noticed started happening was like whenever we have meetings, I saw my voice slowly disappearing because they had such strong, to your point, the ego and their perspective was valid, but then is not for what I built. And literally I remember having to cancel a big project that we had. We had so many stakeholders, almost 300 people coming to Kansas City for it. But then I remember sitting back looking and I'm just like, what does this have to do with what I'm doing? And I remember saying that, and then I had to cancel everything like a week before, which turned out to be a big problem, which also showed that they didn't see me as the leader. It was the weirdest experience. I was like, whoa, okay, so I should speak up more. I should make sure that I have guidelines like, this is what I'm building. I appreciate your input and I appreciate you helping me further the vision. However, we have to remember this is what the goal is. This is the foundation. And I miss that. And so now moving forward, whenever I hire someone that I know they're way qualified, I spend like 90 days a trial where I get to know them. I get to for them to know me and I open the finances so that they can be more comfortable and understand what's happening before we even start working on like a professional, like not even professional, but like a full-time basis. That's something that I can relate to as a founder, where I just let the ball drop because I was like, oh, they're so smart. They're big titles.
It goes back to the original part of our story is that even when you're sitting across the table, you're presenting yourself, you're presenting your company, you're presenting either for money or partnership or relationship or to come work with me, whatever that is, you're always presenting that information over it. But at any point in time in a conversation, whatever, you got to understand that sometimes the idea of a conversation is bigger than a room, right? And that's when you have to walk away, whether it's hiring a person, whether it's hiring a partnership, or whether it's raising money or capital, whatever that is at some point you have to understand, all right, this is not going in the way I want to go, right? And I say either I know where my vision is, because when they leave out of here, right, they can leave out of here and say, well, thanks for the conversation. I appreciate it, whatever. They can go back to their business being successful, whatever it is. But I have to go back festering over that conversation and say, what am I doing wrong? What should I change? Whatever. So you have to understand that your idea and your vision is just as valuable as that person that sits across from you. I had to learn that really just recently, right? In the hard lessons, but you're better for it. You're really better for it to know that what you're building, what you're doing is not only have the capabilities to succeed, but that you have it on the right track to do, Indeed. So you have to understand that going into it, and that don't let anybody deter you from that. You're going to have to make some changes, some adjustment. But when you've been at it long enough, you had some successes, whatever, nobody wins 100%, right? True. Nobody bats 100 for sure. But if you're batting 60% on your way to success, whatever, I think you're going in the right direction, especially if there's no booklet or manual for it.
Right. No, I hear you. So like we are running out of time. When we kind of, I have something that, like happened from all the conversations that I've had on this podcast, which I'm now calling it the 3 C's of to life, to 3 C's to like retention, to 3 C's. And I want to get your take from it as a founder. The first C is clarity, and the second C is communication, and the third C is capacity. In that order, like how do you see, like clarity play out as a founder, running a company, building the company with individuals, and I would love your take on the clarity aspect, and then also communication, and then also capacity.
Yeah, clarity is important, right? Because that's something that I might not have been the best at starting this out, right? Because especially as a visionary of the company and where you want to take it, is that you are clear on what you want it to do, but you're not clear on the details to get it there, Right. So when you bring people in, you're literally bringing people in to help you get that clarity, right?
Yeah.
But they're looking for you to give them, all right, which way are we going? You're looking for them to give you that information, but they're looking to you. All right, what's our next steps? Yeah. So the clarity comes important. What I learned, I'll tell you what I learned on that too. Is clarity is not the details. It's not what you do. Clarity is the direction that you want to go, and the clear way you can give them what you're trying to do, and to make clarity just competency for everybody, is that you have to tell them, I'm looking for you to give me these here. start out at the beginning of the conversation. Like, I don't come to me for the details. If I had them, I wouldn't have you sitting here, right?
Right.
But what I do know, I have the relationships and the connections to at least get us halfway there. I need you guys to fill in the blank. Let them know be clear on what their role actually is.
Right.
And that's where the egos go outside, right? They go outside the window, because there is no ego in my eyes to where I know everything and all the details. I don't. Mm-hmm. All I know is I have the capacity to get there in some points, right? With the right people. And I know the direction that we want to head in. Are you capable? Do you have enough tools? We're just taking this back to the beginning of the conversation. Do you have enough tools in your tool bag? Because I don't have those tools.
Yep.
That's what you're here for, right? And it goes into the whole thing about being a founder, is that you're hiring and bringing people on to fill in some of those details that you don't have, right? They're leading to you to at least supply the vision. Right. And when that's communicated to me, that's where the clarity side of it too, right?
Gotcha.
Communication starts with that too. Jump back in 3 C's. Communication is a part of that. Being clear as you communicate with them is that don't look for me to give you the detailed answers, whatever. Mm-hmm. What I'm looking for you is to use your tools, right? Yep. To be able to, where I necessarily don't have the capacity to do it, but can you tap into your toolbox and bring something out to help fill in these details while I'm trying to present the vision? Right. So I think communication is so important, because, and I'm learning this. It's not like anything I just been able to do effectively
that's
all
the best
the time.
Way to share it as you're learning.
So you're learning. So really give them a clear cut and really leave ego at the door. Communicate that, hey, there's no egos here at all. I don't know, right? Where some of these things are. I know where we're headed, but I need you to be able to fill in these gaps. That's what I brought you on for. And capacity building is just, I think, on the end of that ties into, the clarity and the communication side, because based on that, you see what kind of capacity your team has, right? Yeah. And what parts of these stair steps that we're going, what parts of those stair steps we can achieve together. Because it ties our whole conversation together, right? I'm glad you kind of put that together that way. We didn't even plan for this, but it kind of makes sense, right? Yeah. But as you're the team, right? The communicating as an agile team to try to get to a certain stair. There's about 5 steps to get to the top, right? Yep. But you're communicating with an agile team. Here's what I need you guys to do, right? Here's where I need your roles are. Fill in the gaps that I don't have. Leave the egos at the door. You get to the first step, right? That's where it starts, when the capacity building starts to make sense. It's like, how many of this resource can take us to the next level, or do they stop here and I bring somebody else in? Half maybe can go with you, half can't. And half may say, this is my job here. Thanks. I've learned a lot. Let me go do what I can do next. Right. But that capacity building for me is really to understand, as we get to each steps and each level, there's people that can help you climb the mountain, parts of the mountain, and there's people that help you stay there, and just understanding where those people sit inside your repertoire of resources that you have is important. And communication and clarity is so important to make that happen.
Yeah. Well, you've beautifully outlined that. I feel like moving forward, that should be a very, talking piece for you, because it kind of encompasses everything that we've talked about here, what you do and how you see things and how you view people that you work with. So again, thank you for breaking that down. All right. This will be the last time I'm going to interrupt your listening experience, but I just want to say this. You know how you finish an episode and you wish you could be in the same room for the conversation? Well, on October 15, you actually can. Workplace Unfiltered, a Heliona experience, is your chance to be part of it all. Live at the Abbott in Kansas City. RSVP at heliona.io before spots run out. That's Heliona as in HELIONA, and I'll see you there. We do have a tradition here that I always ask at the end of every conversation. So after everything that we've talked about, from the moment you walked into the building up until this moment right now, like, how is your spirit right now?
For mine, it's always wondering, right? It's always wondering, right? From a standpoint of, are we doing the right thing right now, right? Do we have the right people, right? And am I headed in the right direction, right? And I think that's the job that's going to always be there. And it's not just with the business, with the family, right? How does it affect your family too? Because as a founder, my wife is key part of it. Like, she's my right hand that helps me manage through a lot of this stuff. So everything I do business-wise affects the family directly. Right. And then what's the end goal? Wondering, what is the end goal? What does the future entail? And those things that you just don't know. The family's key. Like my kids and my wife, close, family members too. Is like, when we get to a certain level, when do we break off and do something, different, right? You know. So it's always wondering. My spirit's always wondering, like, where are we headed? What's the best approach? What's the next steps, right? Once we get to this stair step, what do we do after that?
Right.
So it's always in a place of wonder, right? But gratefulness, right?
Yeah.
Just grateful for what I've learned, where we're at. I share you this and I leave it with this. I tell my son all the time, what's tomorrow? You know, what's tomorrow? And he always repeat back to me, another day to get better. You know, so it was always our thing. So good or bad or whatever, I don't care if you had a good day or a bad day.
Right.
It's always a day to learn from and get better. So it's always in a state of wonder and grateful.
Yeah, I like that. You know, I can see that you have a mind of a founder, and not that that's your identity, but the fact that you have the curiosity of always, you know, what's next, but then also have the humility to say that I don't know, which is very important. That I love to see in founders. Not that my take has any meaning, but you know, it makes me happy when I see founders that, you know, they have that sense of urgency, but then the vision, but they have the humility to know that I need help, and but they also have the clarity to say that this is how I want help to look like, and I know you have the expertise. Come on. But then also when that person is no longer available, we just accept it and move on. Because, you know, we can't dwell on everything that we've lost in this journey. Sometimes it can be very lonely, and I know I have a lot of people that are like not founders and that listen to this podcast, but they work with founders. And sometimes when I talk to them, I see that there's a lack of understanding of what the founder or the original creators have to go through for them to have that security and that blanket, but not like in a you know, a condescending way, but just out of humility for people that are waking up every day, you know, figuring out how to pay the, you know, Friday's coming up.
Man. It's just so one of my close friends, and he's been a part of this journey for a long way. He's an ENT doctor. He said something to me about 3 or 4 years ago along this journey. He said, if you never had to make payroll, you don't understand how hard it is to be in business.
Man, tell me about it. It's crazy.
So when he said that, it was so real to me. And I said, you know what? I at that point, I was just starting to understand it, but I really, truly understand that now. You know?
It's like the amount of time I have to call Bank of America.
It's where it's at. The phone calls all night. It's real, you know. And I think like
it's funny they know me in person now. Hey, I'm building.
Right. They have to know it. I have 3 bank accounts, right? Through them all, but it's a process. It's a process that requires, you know, your full attention, right? And your full attention and an open mind, right? And creativity,
right? Creativity. I can't even tell you how creative you have to be. Not like in the whole creative sense that people say it, but just mentally physically, spiritually, emotionally.
It's gymnastics. So, you got to play. People always say, and I'll leave this. End it with this: is that we're playing chess, not checkers, right? You say that, but I usually try to play chess with all kings and queens, right? I usually try. I start with those. I think there's pawns there. You can leave that a checker, but you try to play with all the kings and queens as possible, right?
Everything on the table.
Everything on the table.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here. This has been awesome. So
Appreciate
again, thank you again.
Absolutely. Thanks, man.